Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Area Chats. I'm your host, Paul Brogan, and we're about all things in the greater Concord area. The people, places, and things that make us a great place to live, work, and play. Today's guest is someone who's been on before and is always a welcome guest. Tony Schinella is a name you most likely know because of Concord Patch. He has for 11 years this week that we're taping this been the face, the voice, and the power behind Concord Patch. And I say that in all honesty because I've watched him through these 11 years as he has worked devotedly to make Concord Patch the best place anyone can turn to get what's going on, to find out the news, or to hear from community voices, because people have a certain freedom and comfort level, I think, Tony, with expressing their opinions on Patch. But welcome back to another show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the compliment. And with that, it was a great show, Paul. Very good to see you again, and we're done. Seriously, though.
No.
Thank you.
It's remarkable. I mean, interestingly, I knew you from the radio station somewhat, but the beginning of Patch started in June of 2011, about 2 weeks before my first book came out, and you sent me questions and things to complete before you did a little blurb for that. And from that experience, I started to do blogs for Patch and found that it was a wonderful way to express opinions and thoughts and feelings and share ideas. And did you expect 11 years ago, because this is the 11th anniversary, that it would go as far as it's gone and evolve the way that it has?
No. I'm in awe sometimes with the amount of people who read it, the amount of comments I get, the amount of news tips I get that I just don't have the time to deal with. There's so many stories that I can't tell, and it has been, it's one of the biggest sites in the company. We have over 1,250 sites, and Concord's like in the top 5 or 6, depending on what day of the week it is. Or a month. The goals change based on days of the month and things like that. But Concord's like in that top 5 or 6, like has consistently been there since I came back. It dipped when I left, and then when I came back, people were like, "Oh my gosh, Tony's back," and they came back, which was great. Thank you. But no, I never thought it was going to be. I thought it would do well. I knew I would work hard, but I never thought it would be as big as it is. We have institutional media outlets in the state. We have a statewide newspaper, we have a regional newspaper, we have weekly newspapers in some areas, monthly. The Bow Times is a great little newspaper for the town, and Channel 9 too. So you just didn't know if it was going to work, and people took to it right away. And that site, the Nashua site, is successful too. It's not as successful, but it does well. And I was just really surprised. I really was. And I didn't believe it. I thought it would do okay. I thought it would sustain, advertising and income level to sustain itself. But I never thought it would become as big as it is.
Now, you had an extensive background in newspaper prior to going to WKXL, right? And so you have been part of the actual print newspapers when there was still, some real value to newspapers. Unfortunately, that in some ways has faded. And then you were radio for quite a while at WKXL here in Concord, and now with Patch. Do you like each one equally, or have you found Patch to be a different kind of excitement or challenge?
Yeah, they're all different. I originally started in radio, and I had a little newsletter that I put out with my radio show. I was at a community radio station at Tufts University back in 1993. It was quite by accident. I was actually politically involved before that, and a number of people heard me on the radio, recognized my voice and heard me and said, "You should really be on the radio. You're just as good as the talk show host you're talking to." which was really a nice compliment to hear. And granted, they're friends, you know, they tell you they
Yes,
really take it
yes.
seriously. And then a friend of mine said, come have a show similar to cable access on the radio. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. And then he's like, well, just come by, you know. So I sorted records and did all that stuff and went through training. And then you know, it was very nervous doing radio for the first time, but it was very exciting. And from there, I played music on one show, and then I did talk on the other show. I had guests on. I had Jerry Brown on, Pat Buchanan, lots of different people from the community, Somerville and Cambridge and things like that. Lots of political candidates during political season. That was weekly.
Yeah.
And then I found that I was kind of middle of the road and maybe a little bit left of center. And on the radio, they only wanted everybody to sound like Rush Limbaugh, and then you had to talk like Rush Limbaugh and whatever. And Rush Limbaugh was really big. At that time, he had like 20 million listeners. He was as big as the New York Times. His influence over you know, the populace and audience.
Yes.
And that wasn't me. You know, I was just, you know, this is dumb and this is smart and whatever. And it didn't really fall into any category. And I've never really been that way anyway. So it was very hard, but people liked what I was doing, but I couldn't get anywhere. And there was no really, and it's similar to baseball, like you've got all your superstars who play Major League, but then you've got like AAA, AA, single A, college, you're playing in Babe Ruth, you're playing in Little League, high school, whatever. You build your career up. There really isn't any curve in radio. There's just like, hey, you were somebody, so we're going to throw you on the air and see if you work, you know, and then that person's gone and they put somebody else in. Many of the people who are big-time people like Rush Limbaugh was started off as DJs, right, when they used to be records.
Yes.
And you had to actually have a person put the music on. You didn't have it on your phone, you know. So that started, that's how they got their radio chops. But there wasn't really any place to be like in a AAA farm team. So, so I would send demos out and stuff, and I had a couple of nibbles. I almost got a job in Nebraska on a weekend slot, which was kind of cool, you know, went back and forth. And almost, I was just like, yeah, I'll come to Nebraska, you know. Like, I can't get hired anywhere else. Right. Sure, what the heck, right? You know, so that was kind of cool. And then a guy wrote an article about me in Nebraska about how difficult it was getting into the business. So I just kept doing that for many years. I had created a little, around election time, I would create little radio snippets for different radio stations that were nonprofit and college radio stations for the news departments and stuff. And then I just kind of eased into the newspaper business, writing $25 stories, and people who knew me from political stuff and people who knew me from the radio. And in fact, it was one editor who said, this kid's going to be a really great newspaper person. And she threatened her boss, if you don't hire him, I'm going to quit. Because at that point, I had spent months and months and months doing $25 stories. I was just about out of money, and I was working odd jobs and stuff. And she managed to hire me, get me hired full time. And then after that, I became an editor very quickly. Then came up to do radio here, and then went back to do newspapers in Massachusetts. And so, yeah. But to answer your question, they're all different. They all have their own benefits. Yes. They all have their own excitements. You know, there isn't anything. I love what I do. I love when I have a win. But when I've had some really creative front pages over the years in newspapers that you can't really do online.
Right.
And
exactly.
you know, you look at. I had one in Belmont, Massachusetts, where I was the newspaper reporter and editor. There were these factions in the town. And mostly old school Democrats that are now Republicans. You know, they were, but they were when Democrats were conservative. Right. You know, Irish Catholic.
Yes.
And these people from Cambridge who lost their rent control apartments and then moved over to Belmont because the housing was cheaper, and then it created this housing crisis almost in Belmont where the prices are just insane. It's $1 million for a condo now. So there were these two factions of the old school and the new people, and they were always battling, and it was really great color and great stories about these two political factions, of which the more liberal younger people have won over at this point. So I had this Star Wars theme about the factions in the galaxy of Belmont, and it was like the Star Wars text at the beginning of the movie. So that was the front page on the New Year's Eve, the New Year's edition, the first day. What will the next year be like for the factions of Belmont? I mean, you just can't do that online.
No,
so there's
no.
me and Ray, the guy who who did all of the layout with me, and I'm like going, no, it's going to be more like this, and I had all the crop marks with my paper and stuff, and that won an award for best design that year, but. The next year, but that was just, you tell a story in a graphic, and that was the whole story. There was no text. The whole story was the text in Star Wars on the whole front of the front page. So, you can't really do that. I mean, I love Patch, but you can't really do that. And you certainly can't do that on the radio.
No.
And you can't even, here I am describing it with you on television, and it's like I thought, I could have brought it, and you would see it, and you would go, I mean, you have great imagination,
Yes.
so I know you're getting what I'm saying. But, yeah, it's all different.
Uh-huh.
By the way, Paul has a new book out. He just gave me his copy of his book, and I'm so excited to. I am so excited to read the book, and here it is right here.
Yes.
So I'm like
Thank you.
I'm beaming. I got a free book. Not only did I get a free book, but it's Paul's new book. So go on and buy it.
Well, I have to say that part of it I owe to you, because as a result of the first book back in 2011, you encouraged me to do blogs for Concord Patch. And I started to do those, and like 3.5 years later, you submitted me for a New Hampshire Press Association award, which I won. But it was your belief and encouragement, too, that helped me to realize that if I keep doing this, maybe I'll get really good at it. And that led to the Concord Theater book, and which you're a part of because you shared your memories of growing up in Concord and going there. And so I do owe a debt of gratitude to you, because you nurture and encourage people to push themselves out of a certain niche, and that they can do it. Because I know there are other people that used to blog regularly that also did so because you encouraged and welcome local voices.
Right.
It's not just, nope, no, we don't have anything for you to place it. And so whether it's just people making comments or whether it's people sharing stories and writing them, it's a wonderful source that we don't have any other source similar to that in the community, because yes, you can write a letter to the editor of the paper and things like that, but the immediacy that is Patch. And I know every morning at 7 a.m. I go to see what are the stories, what's happening now. And there have been times, in April I did 4 or 5 blogs, because as I was reading other stories, I said, oh, I have something I want to say. And that's a wonderful part of the community, because the Monitor has been here forever and I still get my, paper in hand. But unfortunately, that is not the way that most people anymore get their news or advertising or anything else, because that has all changed so radically.
One of the neat things about online, and it's great for bloggers or people who comment. I mean, we have a limited amount of text in the comment sections.
Yes.
And we have, neighbor posts. People can do short neighbor posts, and then there are people who do the neighbor posts, the articles like you do. There is, I don't think there's a limit. I think it's 4,000 or 5,000 words, even that.
Yes.
There isn't, it's unlimited. So we're limited in the amount of time we can talk here. I can come back, which is great.
Yes.
You've had me back, and we've been on a bunch of times, which I'm grateful for. And if you're doing if you have a print product, you can only, and in many ways, I don't begrudge any newspaper saying your letters can only be 300 words. If you can't get your point out in 300 words,
Exactly.
I mean, like,
Yes.
because you can kind of say, this is not right, and you did it in a sentence. But there are nuances in a lot of cases. Sometimes you need more. It should be a column. But even at 600 words, that is very tight sometimes when you're trying to do something that has a lot of elements to it. Online, you can basically do lots of stuff, thousands and thousands of words, and hope that people read, and get to it. One of the great things, and I was grateful for the Concord Theater book, not only because you could tell that history, and also also allowing me to contribute to it, which was really amazing. It was just so nice of you to do that. But you developed that book based on your blogs.
I did.
And it was like, and then you told me I'm going to do a book, and I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that beforehand? And tell you, do the book, do a book, because you had written reams and reams of stories about that theater. And even I know you didn't touch, and this is not a criticism in any way, I know there was so much more you could have touched upon. You really only really dabbled into things like, I think about movie receipts, or the horror movie director who wrote the book, Roger Corman, wrote the book about I made 1,000 films in Hollywood, never lost a dime, or whatever it's called, similar like that. But he talks, and I was like, oh, that made how much and how many drive-ins? I mean, stupid data like that I'm kind of into. But you talked about Valley of the Dolls and talked about some of the popular movies. But there were so many other stories you've got to gotten into with how many movies people actually showed up for, and which ones more. There were more that bombed. This was a huge movie everywhere else, and here it bombed. So and you touched upon some of those, but I'm sure you could have written hundreds of notes about those films, and didn't. So it's like, it's a voluminous book about a movie theater that's just so heartwarming, and so Concord.
And it's something we'll never see the likes of again. That type of thing. Yes, you have Red River and Independent Theater, etc., but it's not the personalities that were associated with the Concord Theater, the family, and all of that. And it was a totally different time where going to the movies was a real night out, and it was a time in the city's community. When you were growing up, certainly when you were coming to see Pretty in Pink or things like that, that it was special. It was
Rocky III, so many other movies. I mean, like that were just that came there, that you went to go to that theater to see, and had to see them at the theater. It was a really special place.
It was. So, what does the future hold? Do you envision staying with Patch indefinitely? Because I see it continuing to grow, not just your responsibilities, because you're now no longer just editor of Concord Patch. You're head editor of the entire region, correct?
I do most of the state. There's going to be some changes coming in that, I'm told, which is really cool, which will allow me, frankly, to do more interesting stories, and probably more in Concord. But they're going to be shifting around some of the responsibilities. We have 14 sites now covering 15 communities, and a statewide site in one of those two. And then I'm going to go to 4, which is what I had when I came back in 2019. So, and of the 4, it's going to be Concord and a couple of smaller sites. So I hope it will allow me to be more creative, to do more video, to do more interviews, and there's always going to be all the same stuff as before. But there'll be more, and I'm excited about that. So that change is coming soon, which is good. We just hired. We hired one person who didn't work out, but we've hired another person, so they've taken on Nashua and Salem. So those sites are going to get their own person, which is really big, which is a really big deal. And because Nashua really should be as big as Concord is, and it does well, but it's not as big as it should be, and it really deserves its own person like Concord has me. So I'm excited about that change, and it's just in time for political season. So the circus is going to be coming to town, and I want to get out there. It isn't even presidential time, but I try to get out there and meet all of the candidates and do videos with them, and kind of ask them. Last time it was, how do you heal the divide in the nation, because the nation's really divided, and it was divided before Trump. Everybody says it was Trump, but it wasn't. It was divided. I mean, Bush versus Gore was a tie. Reagan was a landslide in 2 elections. The first Bush was a landslide. Barack Obama was a landslide in 2008, but every other one in there was really close, and which really shows you that the dynamic. I mean, the country is really divided. And it really has been. It may not be as vicious as it was before, or it's more now. Probably. and everybody had, you had polite society in 1983 if you didn't agree with the president,
Right.
you know, or Tip O'Neill. You know, you're
Right.
a Tip O'Neill fan, and you know, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan had beers together, and and they did, and you know,
Yeah.
there are pictures of
Yes.
it. They signed the budget, and then they all got together for a beer, and we can't do that anymore
No.
on any
No.
level. But so in 2020, that was my question for all the candidates. It basically was one question: what are you going to do to heal the divide? Because it's not just about beating Donald Trump, because it's always been here. And I was surprised at how many of the candidates really had no idea. They really had no idea. So I got to come up with a. You know, we'll see what 2023 brings when the candidates come up with my one question. And get out there and do that. And then we have midterms, so I hope to do a little bit more of that, and do more long form stuff, which would be good. And I'll have time for it too.
Do you have candidates that refuse to talk with you that you approach, or are they usually fairly amenable?
I was surprised at the answer is yes. There are some who have avoided me. You know, it's weird. I was really surprised. Tulsi Gabbard, who ran last time, who I actually was very impressed with, and I could not line up an interview. And I'm always straight with people. You know, I always say, you know, when Bill Wells, people said he's going to be at this coffee house, you know, and I was like, oh, thank you, you know, because you're on the list.
Yes.
And say, hey, I really want to come by. Can I get 5 minutes with him? I really only have one question. I'm doing it with all. And it was this really long piece. It was a 3,000 word piece with like 8 videos. And a couple of people emailed me commentary for it. So, you know, so it's not like it's a gotcha. It's all, I have one question that year. And some of the other times it's just you throw stuff. In 2016, I had a little bit more time. So I got to talk about specific issues, and it was only, you know, everybody knew Hillary Clinton, and, you know, it was Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders on one side, but you had so many Republicans on the other side, so you got to meet a lot more of them. But yeah, so it's some of them try to avoid you. Most of them don't. It's not like the old days.
No.
It's not like the old days when you could really sing, not to talk about beer more, but, you know, you could go down to, you know, to the hotel in Bedford, and Jack Germond would be at the bar, and you could go, you're Jack Germond, right? You know, you know, I love that piece you did about whatever, or, you know, how come you're always beating up on Jerry Brown all the time, you know? And he would say, he'd say he's a flake, he's a jerk, whatever, you know, and you know, whatever. You could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't much anymore.
No.
And I've had a couple of those over the years, recently, but they're not the same as it was before. Everybody has their guard up, and that's understandable. They want to win. They don't trust anybody in our business.
True.
And why should they? Because the next time you turn around, somebody's like making stuff up about you.
Exactly.
I don't do that, but you know, some do.
Yes. No. Well, how do you keep your energy level so extraordinary? And you do. And it's infectious. I mean, anyone that knows you or has spent more than 5 minutes with you knows how genuine that is. I mean, even now, after being involved with media and newspapers, et cetera, for decades, how do you still find such joy and delight or interest? Well,
it's a job first. So I've always been a hard worker. I like to work. I probably shouldn't work as much as I do, but enjoying the work, wanting to do better, wanting to do more. And people always say, like, they ask something similar, but how do you manage to do X, right? It's a similar question, but different. And I always kind of say, well, if I want to know, or somebody, if, you know, I'm going to assume somebody else is going to want to know. So then if somebody else wants to know, then I need to find out, because I want to know too. So it's kind of, you know, and there's some tricks of the trade, you know, how I cheat.
yes.
I'm not going to tell anybody. But, you know, you just work hard, and you presume other people want to know about stuff, and and that's what I tend to do. And I enjoy it, I think, too. I mean, I've always enjoyed, you know, I've had other jobs I've enjoyed, too. I enjoyed doing radio. I enjoyed being, you know, a busboy when I was a busboy.
Where was that?
At Thursday's Restaurant. That was fun. I did shifts there. I did a dessert shift. I got to wash dishes one night a week. I bussed tables. You know, it was fun. I like to work. It's fun. You know, so it isn't really. You don't really think about it. You know, at some point you got to shut off. But you don't really say, hey. what are you going to be doing? You know, what keeps your energy level going up? It's like, well, I want to know. You know, I want to know all the same things lots of people want to know. I don't know everything. How come I don't know everything? Because the day's only so long.
Exactly.
And you collapse after 18 hours or whatever, and you know, you can't know any more that day. But that's just a lot of it's a motivational thing. You know, I want to know why there are ambulances on whatever street.
Do you like having your base of operations again be here in Concord, where you grew up, and as opposed to out in Nebraska or Massachusetts or someplace else?
Well, I lived for a long time in Massachusetts, so it was not hard working in Massachusetts because I'd been there.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
I mean, I moved away. I lived in New York City for a couple of years, and then I lived in Boston for 18 years, and then I moved back to raise my kids, and. So yeah, I mean, it's good to have it's good. One of the things too is that, and this isn't going to sound right, but it's good to explore new places, but it's also good to have that institutional knowledge. So you know, for example, I won't mention any names about there's a politician who's running for re-election who held another office before, and they are promoting the fact that they want to find waste in government. But you know, 8 years ago when they were in charge and they asked their department heads to come up with, you know, a budget that was cut by 5 to 10% and come back and show how your department would look, all those records were sealed. So, and that person didn't want anybody to see them. Most people don't remember that. And if I gave you the name of the person, you could Google all the newspaper stories from back then. And people change over the years.
Yes.
You know, you might look at things differently, and it may not have been the best thing to have cut or proposed cuts to departments by 5 to 10%. But it's kind of like, why couldn't any of us look at it? Well, now you're auditing stuff, right? Well, yeah, you should audit stuff. We're $30 trillion in debt and whatever, and you know there's interest on that, and it's we want to be able to get our Social Security,
right?
You know, and wait till the young people have to figure out they got to pay for our Social Security, right? We don't want to go there, but you know, you're doing it now, right? So 8 years ago you could have done it too, and you didn't. And not only that, you hid it from people like me who said, well, I want to see what's in there. Well, it's executive privilege. Okay, all right, no problem. You know, so it's like kind of that, you know.
Exactly.
It's kind of that thing, you know, not to, nobody remembers that. I know where all the, how do you know, you know, my wife will say sometimes, how do you know that street's over there? I've driven by that street like 100 times. I know exactly where it is.
Exactly.
Right? You know, now I could go up and move to New Orleans or wherever, or you know, or Albany, and it would be good. It would be a good task to try and do that. But I wouldn't know where everything was. I wouldn't even know. I'd have to go and relearn all the New York laws, and you know. So yeah, it's comfortable being able to work in the place that you really know.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Paul?
Yes,
right? Because
absolutely.
Paul has a new book. He has right over there. Paul has a new book based here in Concord as well. Does a TV show. Been doing it 4 years, 2 years longer than he was on the radio. And it's right here. Can't wait to read it.
Well, we're very glad to have you here in Concord, and unfortunately, we're running out of time, but. That doesn't mean you can't come back, and you will be invited back.
Thank you.
Because you're always a great guest, and you were a great guest on the radio show. You were on 5 times.
Was I?
You were the record guest 5 times.
Yeah,
so.
you know, it's funny because it just goes by so fast, and I remember the shows where, oh right, I was on with Jessica once.
Yes.
Yep.
Downtown Dialogues.
A bunch of times. Yep.
Yes,
that was
exactly.
fun.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you'll be back, and I know I'll see you around, and I'll be doing a blog about the 11th anniversary of Patch, and congratulations.
Thank you. And I should say, one of the neat things, and everybody can go to Patch on Friday, because Friday is the 11th anniversary. There'll be a post up around 3 o'clock. And I won 9 New Hampshire Press Association awards this year, which I'm very excited about, including 3 first place awards, which was great. And I talk about that and a bunch of stuff with the site about the site, and that was a really crazy accomplishment this year. So it's been 19 awards in 3 years, and I never would have believed it. So It's pretty. We're doing really good stuff, and we'll continue to. And I appreciate all your contributions as well.
Congratulations. Absolutely. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Tony Schinella. Thank you to all of my viewers. Thank you to Matt and the people here at Concord TV for making this possible. I'm your host, Paul Brogan, wishing you well, and we'll see you back on Capital Area Chats real soon. Thank you.